The Chronic Illness Therapist podcast is meant to be a place where people with chronic illnesses can come to feel heard, seen, and safe while listening to mental health therapists and other medical professionals talk about the realities of treating difficult conditions. This might be a new concept for you, one in which you never have to worry about someone inferring that it's all in your head. We dive deep into the human side of treating complex medical conditions and help you find professionals that leave you feeling hopeful for the future. I hope you love what you learned here, and please consider leaving a review or sharing this podcast with someone you love. This podcast is meant for educational purposes only. For specific questions related to your unique circumstances, please contact a licensed medical professional in your state of residence.
Cruz is a private practice owner, women's mental health advocate, and educator. Kara's area of focus is on perinatal mental health, ADHD, trauma, mood, and anxiety conditions. And in addition to psychotherapy with individuals and couples, Kara also facilitates mental health training for professionals focused on women's mental health, workshops, and support groups for women. Kara is also the co-founder of Women's Support Circle, a community for women offering monthly no-cost support circles, workshops, and a safe space for women to gather in community. Kara, is that open to everybody? Is it online, in person?
Women's Support Circle. Yeah. So Women's Support Circle is a virtual group that happens monthly. We host it via Zoom, and it's open to all women anywhere. We've had participants from Canada, from Australia. This isn't a therapy-based service, so we're not bound by state lines in terms of that particular group. We're not doing any kind of diagnosing or mental health treatment, but it is more of a place of support community. And we do address topics related to mental health, topics related to issues that women may go through, and have more of a kind of a community conversational platform style. And we share resources and things like that, versus my groups and individual and couples therapy. Those are also virtual services and offered to those in California.
Awesome. Can you kind of give me what themes do tend to come up?
Yeah. We talk about relationships, boundaries, stress, overwhelm, and burnout. We will talk about grief, parenting topics, but not all of our community members are parents. But sometimes when that feels like that's the energy and vibe during that time, we will introduce a topic that has to do with parenting, being a mom, perinatal mental health, perimenopause. So it's very open, and we like to hear from our community members, because from month to month, year to year, themes can change. So we also invite our community members to give us topic ideas on what's weighing on them, what they'd like to hear about and talk about. We've hosted workshops in the past on some of our more popular topics, where these are more 2-hour closed group, 1 to 2 part series. So we've done a holiday and stress, or boundaries and stress during the holidays. We have a self-love, self-compassion workshop that we like to do in February around Valentine's Day, emotional regulation, body love, and self-love. We've done that before during the summertime. So sometimes if we have a more popular topic, we'll end up adding a workshop that gets a little bit deeper into things.
Yeah, I love that. That's amazing. I know that in your form that you filled out beforehand, one of the things that you had mentioned was basically like women and men, but we're talking specifically about women's health today, often gets shut down and dismissed, and especially during moments of crisis. And I'm curious if we can maybe start there and go into does that come up in your groups? Is that something you're often working on? And when you think about women getting dismissed, what is your kind of approach around? Is it around self-advocacy, or is it talking about systems at play, or is it talking about how we manage emotions during that, like communication style? What is it that you feel like you're working on the most with people?
It's all of it, really. You say self-advocacy. That's actually one of the points in the groups that I facilitate for women. One of the main points of the takeaways is to learn self-advocacy, particularly in perinatal mental health and perimenopause, when a lot of my clients are going different places, whether it be with their family, whether it be to a health provider, and they're sharing their experiences or their symptoms. And that's when that dismissiveness, and they use those words a lot. So I'm not putting those words out there for them, but they'll say, I felt unheard, I felt dismissed, I felt Like I was imagining it or making it up. I was told that nothing was wrong with me physically. They couldn't find anything. It was all in my head. And I even have a webinar that I did, perimenopause. It's not all in your head, just based on that constant hearing that same language. I was like, we're going to do a webinar on that. And so in the groups, in individual work, the first part is just listening and hearing the person out and believing them. And just that goes a long way. But really, it's helping the clients to build their confidence and advocate for themselves. And there's a lot of different layers to that. There's organizing their thoughts and writing things down. And we do symptom trackers and checklists. Like from a logistical standpoint, those are some of the tools we use. But also it is really building their self-confidence and teaching my clients and the people I work with to listen to themselves versus listening to, we always talk about internal versus external. Is that an external pressure or expectation, or is this what you truly believe and feel? Because a lot of times the clients that I work with have learned to stop trusting themselves and stop listening to themselves or question themselves. They don't believe themselves.
That's, yes, also so common with what I see too. And it's easy to not trust yourself or believe yourself when, one, if you're not a medical professional and you don't have that knowledge and you're deferring to the person in front of you who has been trained in medical issues, then yeah, you want to believe them. They're the experts. But yet somehow they're often, way too often, there's this divide between what the medical professional in front of me is saying is like possible or right or wrong, and then what I'm feeling inside.
Yeah. And a lot of women that I work with often feel like if they're doing their own research, they'll be told, don't be Googling your symptoms or looking up stuff online because you're not the doctor. But to me, that's okay to do. If I have somebody who might get a little bit down the rabbit hole and it's not healthy for them, then we work on that. But if it's somebody who's really trying to advocate for themselves and get some answers, sometimes that's the option that they have. And I do caution them. You don't want to be self-diagnosing. If we're going down the rabbit hole and it's creating more stress, that's probably not the healthiest. But that's a part of self-advocacy, is doing your own research, because we're our own best advocate. Or when it's with our children, if we're not getting answers, sometimes it's the people who make the squeaky wheel, or they're digging deeper to find the answers. And sometimes they're finding the answers themselves. And sometimes going along that rabbit hole helps them to find the provider who will listen to them and give them the answers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's part of the problem is, like I said earlier, we don't have the education. And so in order to speak the doctor's language, a lot of times we have to do this research just to even get the right words. I know I wish I could remember the exact details. There was a TikTok I watched of this girl sharing her story, and it was like something about, she had this like eye issue and there was like a name for it. But every time she went to the eye doctor or her PCP or whatever, like she'd explain it and she didn't have the right words for it. And they were just like, you're crazy. We don't know what you're talking. They didn't say you're crazy, but they're like, we literally have no idea what you're talking about. I don't, go home and get some rest. And then eventually through this rabbit hole of information, she figured out what the name of the disease was, like then was able to then ask for the right testing and get the right things. And now she has a diagnosis. And I don't understand why it has to be that way, but that's a common story.
Yeah. And just listening to a person is so important. I worked in psychiatric facilities also in my experience. And one of the things that was really so hard to see was having somebody who maybe this was their first or second time, really had limited mental health exposure to a psychiatric facility, and wanting answers and wanting to share their experience and not being listened to or heard, being interrupted, being shut down. If they had questions and weren't too sure about the treatment plan, whatever medication they were being given or whatever, they were being told that they were non-compliant, or they were being difficult, or they had no insight to their condition because they weren't willing to take the medication, when they really just wanted some answers. I want to know, am I going to have to depend on this? What are the side effects? Do you really think this is my diagnosis? I don't think, this doesn't seem right. And watching that was really hard to do. It was really hard. And working as a therapist or a social worker in those spaces, you really have to watch whose toes you step on. And you don't want to step on any toes, because I'm not a doctor. I'm a listener, and I would want to help did you share this or that, help to advocate for the patient or the client. It was really challenging. Even for me, sometimes I felt shut down or ignored. When I supervise other clinicians that often will have that experience, they see their clients, they know their clients well, they see them weekly. And sometimes they're even shut down when they have ideas about what could be going on.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned one of the things that you do to help someone prepare for self-advocacy is the logistical work. Is like writing things down, having a list, maybe writing your questions down, right? That's the kind of logical piece of it, what are some of the emotional things that people can do if they, especially if they know they're prone to shutting down? If you know this ahead of time about yourself, what are some things that we can maybe do to alleviate that a little as best as we can?
Yeah, in session, it's practicing. It's just say anything you need to me, filter free. I'm not judging you. You can say a bad word. You can sound disrespectful. I don't care. I want you just to actually get it out. And then we'll just see what's in the room with us, what's going on, what emotions are showing up. We do a lot about what's coming up in your body, your nervous system. Is your chest getting tighter? Are your hands getting sweaty? Is your mind going blank? We do a lot of nervous system work because I want to see, are you going into fight, flight, freeze, shut down? What's happening for you in those moments? And really try to build their tolerance, open that window of tolerance for them so that they have the capacity when they're in the moments to access the information. That's why we did the list, because the list is there. They can rely on that as a backup, but we really do a lot of body nervous system, which is weird for people at first. But once they get used to that, it's helpful because then they'll come back and say, I noticed as soon as I made that phone call, my chest tightened up, my mind went blank. Okay, so what do we do next? So really working on that for them to recognize that and know that about themselves. And it's not that you're wrong or you're bad. It's actually your body was trying to help you and protect you and keep you safe by doing that. Your body's not trying to harm you. Your body felt unsafe in that moment, whether there was an actual danger happening or the danger was that somebody's not listening to me, they're not believing me, they feel unsafe emotionally. And so we usually just go straight for that first. And then it's tools, and then it's other tools like, let's do a role play of what you might say or do. What if this happens? How might you respond? We talk about the different parts of themselves that come up, the shutdown part of me or the confident part of me. So how can we access that part of you? When are you most confident? When are you most able to advocate for yourself? Let's talk to that part of yourself and get to know that part and see if that part can make some space in the room during that appointment. So we do a lot of different things, really looking at the nervous system, what's happening, giving some education as to why that's happening, helping the tools that are just like that backup if I need to rely on, like having something written down. A lot of my neurodivergent clients, that's really helpful too, because it's hard for them to organize their thoughts sometimes. And then when they get nervous or anxious, it even makes it harder.
Yeah. And nervous system regulation, I feel like is a little bit of you and I know what that is, but I feel like it is a little bit of a buzzword right now. And so just to further delineate that for people, really, you already explained it, but really all it is being aware of what the thing in your body is actually telling you. And because we're so used to disconnecting from our body, we often don't know, oh, did I just tighten up, or did I lose my breath, or did I did my breathing become more shallow? I think before, a lot of therapies and like mental health tips and tricks was just like, take a deep breath. And we're moving away from like the telling of do this, because your tight stomach or your like shallow breath might mean something different than mine. So it's not about just counteracting the tightness or the shallow breathing. It's what does this mean for you? And if we can pause and sit with that long enough, then our brain will tell us what it is we should be doing for us.
Yeah. Instead of telling them what to do, I ask what's happening right now. And I do all virtual, but I'm on video with my clients. So if I see the slightest shift in their body, their eyes look away, I see the breath happening, I'll ask them, do you mind if we pause for a minute? Can you just tell me what happened just now? And sometimes they're aware, oh, I know I took a deep breath. Sometimes they like, what do you mean? And I'll say, from my point of view, I noticed that you took a real deep breath when we start talking about this, or I noticed that you looked down or you looked away. Do you know what happened? And just starting there and also keeping in mind their window of tolerance. And I don't want them to get to a level 10 anxiety, panic, worry, flooded with emotions. I want to keep them at a lower range and go really slow. We're not always getting into all the details and nitty gritty of things, but we're talking about what just happened in your body right now. When I said that, in separating out what sensation did you feel in your body? What emotion is connected to that? And then what thought did you have? Because we tend to always be in our thoughts in our heads. So that's usually say, hey, let's just ask those thoughts to see if they can float aside for a second. Let's get into your body, get into your emotions first. And then over time, they start to see their own patterns. Or outside of session, they'll say, I noticed that. I did that thing again where I held my breath or my chest got tight. I noticed it now. And I noticed what was happening. And I did take they knew that they needed a breath. That's what they needed, right? Or they knew that they needed to take a minute, or whatever it is that they needed, they could fulfill their own need. They didn't need somebody to tell them what they needed to do.
Which I think, and then going maybe a little bit deeper into perinatal work, when you are pregnant and things are changing by the week, it is so hard to know what your body needs, what's happening, what's not happening. So what you just described there is teaching the person how to figure it out for themselves, because which is especially important when you're changing every single week.
Yeah. And it's also important. I always think about if you have safe, supportive people around you and you invite them into this world that you're learning about yourself, then that's also great because they can give you some observation and feedback. But if you don't have safety around you, I'm not going to encourage my client to do that. So I really want them to start to trust themselves, that because they might feel or experience something. And if they have an unsafe person around them, they might be telling them that's not what's going on, or they might be getting dysregulated again or feeling unsafe again. So really making sure that they do have safety and support. And if they do, it's great, because then I know one time my husband, I was having a day and frustrated about something. And I was like, I feel like I'm getting dizzy. And he's like, you're not breathing. Oh, but it's so funny because I have this experience in that moment, and I was already a therapist. I already, was doing this work. And just that person pointing out their observation of, I noticed you're holding your breath, you're not breathing. I'm so much more in tune to that now. When I feel that same sensation, that lightheadedness, if I'm feeling stressed or overwhelmed, I check in with my breath now. Oh, it is as simple as taking a deep breath in those situations, but not always. But that was helpful to have a safe observer point that out for me.
I think that's so important. And that's something I often, especially for people who are, I tried therapy, like it didn't work. I already know these tips, tricks. I know these, like I know my clients, like they read a lot. Like there's really almost nothing I can actually teach you that you don't already know or can't easily find in a book. But our work is about having a safe person who can point those things out to you in a very kind and compassionate way. We're not meant to do this alone. It just helps to have somebody who can see that when it's happening, because we can't always see the forest through the trees.
Yeah. And your point about the whole, I know what I need to do. Why don't I do it? And I will share with clients, talking about something is different than experiencing something and different than making change. We can't talk about the idea of having motivation in our life and then just get the motivation. There's sometimes things behaviorally we have to do, or we have to experience something in our bodies to see what our nervous system is, what kind of our default setting is. We don't just talk our way through things.
Yeah.
Talking is helpful. I'm a talker. I'm a processor. I love it and I find it beneficial.
Yeah.
But I may stay stuck if that's all I do.
Yeah. Yeah. Plus, especially some of us are more extroverted or introverted. So you might actually need to verbally process more, literally, to be more motivated, or you might actually need to process less in order to be more motivated. I know my husband and I are complete opposite ends of the spectrum with that. So it's like, when I know he's working on a problem, like I've got to actually let him be in his own head. And when I'm working on a problem, he's got to come and pull me, like, and allow me to process those words verbally. So again, that's another part of therapy, is it just helps you discover some of these things about yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
What else comes up for you around either women's mental health or perinatal? Do you also work with people who are struggling with health conditions during pregnancy or post-pregnancy too? Maybe, yeah.
All of the above. Although I work in the perinatal mental health, reproductive mental health, perimenopause field, not all my clients are actually parents. So a lot of who I work with are people who've experienced trauma in their lives. And it's not always like this one big traumatic event. I had this experience one time and I have flashbacks about it. A lot of times it's complex trauma where there's a lot of little things over time that have added up, or a lot of big things over time that have added up. And there's a lot to unravel. And so it's not always parents and moms, but a lot of my clients do also have other health conditions. And sometimes that can get a little confusing, because the question is, what am I experiencing? Mental health? Is it physical health? Is it a combination of both? And so sometimes being able to sort that out, it really requires being able to collaborate with their medical professionals in a professional, healthy way so that we're able to untangle that. Some of the most common things, the clients that come to me experience things like PCOS and infertility, traumatic birth that's caused physical medical complications during or after. Let's see, I've had some clients who have experienced seizures early on in life and being mindful of that. I don't have one specific type of medical or chronic issue that's more common, but there usually is something else that's going along with what they're experiencing on an emotional level.
That makes sense. That's a good way to put it too. Yeah, it's not the like commonality of, oh yeah, most people go through this, whatever. But most people go through something else, and then the layered consequences of that are what we work through. Having 2 really hard things happening, or 3 or 4, plus the trauma of your past, like all of that compounds together, and that's where your work comes in.
Yeah. Yeah.
What else comes up for you around this?
Yeah, it's really important for me that the first thing I enjoy working with my clients on is really learning to rebuild their relationship to themselves and reconnect with themselves. Because a lot of times it's a lot of external expectation. It's a lot of outside of themselves that's driving them. And so it's like a reversal of we're actually going to start listening to yourself, trusting yourself. And that relates to their mental health, their medical health. If they go and experience an interaction with someone that doesn't feel right, when they're asking, what do you think? I say, I can tell you what I think, but I want to know what you think and how that was for you, because it's not wrong. Whatever it is, it's not wrong. It's your experience. And so I find that a lot of us, I include myself too, really struggle with trusting ourselves and having a good relationship with ourselves. And so that's something that really stands out with me, is instead of trying to say or do or give the answers that you're supposed to or that are right, it's whatever your answer is right. I don't know, this is a little bit all over the place, but a lot of it comes back to that. It really begins with them.
Yeah, I resonate with that as well so much. So then I'm curious, like what you've done for yourself, or maybe even things that you like help clients do that help build that trust with yourself.
Yeah. So a lot of themes that I see with clients is there's a lot of past behaviors that are, we hear a lot, it's like the buzzword people pleasing and perfectionism and all that. But a lot of it is I'm doing things for other people or what's expected of me, but it's not really what I want to be doing. But if I don't, then people are going to be upset with me. Boundaries are hard for a lot of people I work with because they're afraid of people being disappointed in them or mad at them. Some of the work I've done really is, I think, just having the realization, and it's through not just my own personal work and therapy, but working with other professionals and working with other colleagues who get this and have the same view, is doing my own work on trusting myself and knowing that it's being okay with not everybody agreeing with me or liking me. That's okay. If not everybody agrees with me, likes me, that's actually okay. That doesn't mean I'm wrong or I'm bad or there's anything wrong. It just, not everybody's supposed to like me. And my expectation that everyone's supposed to agree with me and like me, that's why they don't have to. And so starting with that, of letting go of that, it takes work, but that's been really helpful, because then once you are able to, even if you can't fully let go of it, set it aside, you're able to really just be who you are, knowing that, hey, the risk is that I might not be everyone's cup of tea, but that's okay.
Yeah. When you're trying to make sure everyone is happy or everyone likes you, since that's physically literally not possible, it sets you up for failure from the beginning. So when you change that expectation to not everyone's going to like me or agree with me, which is literally the norm, that is what should be happening. Now there's no more like cognitive dissonance around it, where there's these 2 opposing stories in your mind of they should like me, but they don't, but they should, but they don't. It's more they won't all, and they don't. And so therefore the story like makes sense in our head now.
Yeah. And that comes up when a lot of the blocks and barriers for when I'm working with women and getting help, coming back to your topic of chronic illness or any kind of illness or getting answers, is they're afraid to make somebody mad or upset with them if they challenge somebody. So if I go to, and I don't want to put it all on doctors, because doctors are wonderful and great. So sometimes it could be their partner, it could be their friend, it could be their teacher, if it's whatever it is, right? Where they're going and expressing themselves of how they feel, and they're either met with resistance or something uncomfortable. They're afraid of making waves or expressing themselves because the other person might not like that. It might not be polite. And so unlearning that can be really challenging for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think what comes up for me when you mention that is the power differential. I know I live in a big city, and so it's very easy for me to say, if you don't like your doctor, go find a different one. But I know that for a lot of people, that's not a reality. If you piss off your doctor, that they might not give you the care. I don't mean if they're doing something malicious, then that's grounds for a board report and losing your license. But we're talking about just like the insidious, subtle, maybe they're just not going to give you as much time, or they're going to be even more dismissive of you, but you don't have another choice to switch. And so it is really tricky, I think, because yeah, it's like on one hand, we have to learn how to assert ourselves, stand up for ourselves, be confident in what we need, but then knowing too that we might not always get that. And then navigating that can just get really tricky.
Yeah. I usually work with my clients is no matter what you do to change yourself, that doesn't mean that the other person's going to respond well to it. So how can you navigate that, and how can you navigate that safely? So it doesn't always mean that you're going to speak 100% your mind and not care about what you say, because you might be at risk of getting fired from your job. Or if you're a teenager and you live with your parents, you might not have another option. So the safer option is to learn how to tolerate a really unhealthy situation until you have the safety to get out on your own. But I found that a lot of people really, especially the clients I work with, the people I work with, are really in tune with kind of how to navigate that, because that people pleasing part does come into play, and it does keep a lot of people safe. And I'll talk to my clients about, even though it's not a malicious trait, it is manipulative. And I say manipulative not in a bad way, or like you have to learn how to manipulate, keep people calm, or not make waves to access your needs and get what you want. And we learn that sometimes at a young age. And that's not something that's wrong with you or bad about you. That is something that you maybe learned for survival, or it's something that you learn to keep safe or to stay safe. And if that's what you need, then that's what you need. So if you have that doctor in that town and you can't just switch easily, how can we help you to still advocate for yourself, but stay safe?
Yeah, I always like to tell people when we talk about manipulation in that word, the definition is how to handle or control, typically in a skillful manner.
Mm-hmm.
So it has such a negative connotation, but sometimes you do have to skillfully navigate and control, especially in your medical care, how you're going to get treatment. Because that could be the difference in really great quality of life, despite living with a medical condition, or really poor quality of life, just depending on how willing or people pleasing back your doctor is going to be, because they do have that control.
Yeah. And with young children, people call them manipulative. I'm like, are they adaptive, or are they manipulative? Are they getting their needs met? Because if they know how to walk into a room when mom or dad is really angry or mad and hostile, and they know how to make a funny joke and make the mood light, and that's manipulative, or they clean the house and the parents they're just doing it to get what they want. Hey, they're doing it to feel safe, to get rid of the tension and the anxiety in the house. And they've learned that's what works. And people say survival. Oh, is it life? Sometimes it is, but sometimes emotional safety feels the same. Feeling emotionally safe and not on edge in your environment is important. And yeah, I use the word manipulative. I use that adaptive word I like better.
I like that word too. Yeah, adaptive. Yeah, we very quickly learn how to adapt, for better or worse. Yeah. Any other kind of thoughts come up around women's health that you wanted to explore that we haven't touched on?
Yeah, it is very promising that it's sad and promising at the same time, right? We're this far along since the beginning of time. When I think about perinatal mental health, and I think about perimenopause, menopause, conditions that have been going on since the beginning of time, likely, and we're just now getting a lot more traction and attention and awareness. So that is promising. I think it's important to continue to spread the word, but also encourage women to trust themselves, and if they're feeling something, if something doesn't feel right for them, they're allowed to continue to pursue that if something doesn't feel right for them. So trusting their intuition, trusting their instincts, that's adaptive too, because we know ourselves more than anyone else does. And when it comes to perinatal mental health, working with, oftentimes what I hear is I'll have a client who'll say they'll go and tell somebody that they're not feeling like themselves, they're not feeling right. And they're like, it's not just the baby blues, or I'm feeling a little bit sad, like something really isn't right. And a lot of times they're met with, you have a very healthy baby, you have a great family, just go home and be happy. And then they say, okay, something must be wrong with me. And so a lot of the work I do is, no, something is not wrong with you. You're experiencing something that feels very wrong, and you're right about that. So really believing people when they say something, their experience, whether we feel like it's manipulation, or we feel like it's adaptability, or whatever we feel like, that behavior has a purpose and a need that needs to be met. So instead of trying to fight against that, it's really just believing people and their experiences and asking them what they need for support. That's one of the main things I really try to do with my clients and the people I work with, and when I'm working with clinicians on how to help the people that they serve and they work with as well.
Yeah. Yeah, my last thought on that is if you are postpartum, just please get your lab work done. Like I don't understand why it's not a standard practice, 6 to 12 weeks postpartum. But I know for me, like I just had a baby in January, and I was so exhausted every single day. And of course, what do people tell you when you have an infant? Of course you're tired. You're up all night. And I was like, this is different. Like, this is just, and yeah, I was borderline anemic. I wouldn't have known that if I didn't go to my functional medicine doctor and ask for basically just a basic hormone and vitamin like panel. And so it's a lot of times there is a physical component to all of this too, that I just would be remiss if I didn't mention.
Yeah, no, it's important. Working with women in the perimenopause stage of life too, a lot of times they don't do blood work to determine that. The experts are saying that they go by the symptoms and what's going on with the person, because blood work can be all over the place.
Right.
But during the perinatal period, it can be really important. A lot of things hormones are changing depending on whatever happened. You can be anemic. You could already have something. A lot of the clients I work with are low in vitamin D and low in other ways. And so making sure to keep an eye on that, kind of know where their baseline is, follow up on that, working on sleep. The basic needs is really important. That's where we start, is basic needs, your sleep, support, socialization that is right for your personality, nutrition, body movement. And they're like, we're just starting with these basic things. Yes, but your whole world has been shaken and changed when you're through pregnancy and postpartum and become a parent. So we need to go back and lay the foundation back down in a way that works. And it might look different than it did before because your life is different. And then really looking at, what do we need to address medically? What do we need to address from the mental health perspective in therapy? And a lot of it is just holding space for the person to share their experience and be heard and not be told that they're wrong or they're making it up or they're exaggerating or whatever it is.
Yeah. And that's what I imagine your like women's support group also, just having that space where, one, it's all women. So there's a higher understanding of the similar struggles that we might go through. And two, yeah, just you get to hear so many different people's experiences where listeners might have just heard me say, go get your lab work done. But maybe there's some other thing that comes up that you're processing and then somebody else has an experience with that. And then they can be like, have you thought about this or that? So it's just, I think we're like severely lacking in support group type communal settings. So I just wanted to throw that out there for people listening.
Support groups are so important. And I try to explain, I'll get one-on-one clients I work with and they say, I'd rather do individual work, which I get, because that means that they probably want to talk about more things, get into some other deeper issues that they don't really want to do in a group setting, which is completely fine. That probably means they have some good boundaries and they're like, I don't know if that's safe yet to expose that to a group, or if I'm resourced enough or coping with this well enough to do this in a group setting. But I always tell them group is more of like a complement or a supplement. It's more of a complement to individual. Your individual work is one thing, and your group work is for the social, what you just said, hearing other people's perspectives, getting ideas, knowing that you're not alone, sharing resources. In my support groups, I just love the women in there will share different resources or little things. Like I had one person who had a particular insurance and the other person did too and was having trouble. And they said, oh, did you know that we have access to this, to seeing a registered dietitian? And I didn't even know that. And so just those sorts of things just naturally come up in a group, and it creates a sense of community and friendship. And it's such a different thing. So I often will say therapy is one thing. And sometimes I'll have people in support groups who are doing both because they need more support. I'll have some who are just doing group because they wrapped up their therapy, or some who've never done therapy and they're a little nervous and group is their intro. It's different for everyone, but it's not like it doesn't have to be one or the other, that I'd rather do this or that. You can do both. You can do one at a time. But you get something different out of each experience. And I know we talked about when you said blood work and screening for perinatal mental health. I also want to add that for the mental health component, so I received my certification through Postpartum Support International, and the recommendation is that women are screened in their first, second, third trimester, 6-week or 8-week follow-up appointment, again at 6 months, and also at every pediatric appointment, as well as being screened by their primary care doctor and any lactation consultant or any type of health professional who's working with a pregnant or postpartum woman. That's the standard of care through Postpartum Support International. And then each organization, obstetrics, pediatrics, they have their own too. But oftentimes that doesn't happen. And screening is really screening for the mental health symptoms, depression, anxiety. There's 7 unique perinatal mood and anxiety disorders, and a lot of people don't know that. And so the screening is really important, because anything beyond 2.5, 3 weeks of feeling not yourself, feeling sad or anxious, that would be more of the baby blues. Anything beyond that could be something else. It could be medical too. Medical conditions can change what's happening for a person and cause mental health. If you think about brain fog or being exhausted or tired or moody, it could be something going on with your blood work, but it could also be sleep deprivation. It could be hormones. It could be lack of support. There could be domestic violence in the family system. So there's so many things. So screening is important. And if I want to say one thing important, if you're someone listening and you're either a perinatal patient yourself, person, or you are a professional who works there, visit Postpartum Support International, because there is a standard of care that's recommended for screening for perinatal mood and anxiety disorders.
Thank you. And can you maybe give some or all, if you can't remember off the top of your head, but you said there's 7 different perinatal mental health disorders. Is that what you said?
And I know these, and my neurodivergent brain is going to go all over the place right now, but I'm going to do my best.
Yes.
So there's depression, anxiety, OCD, panic, bipolar disorder, psychosis. I didn't count how many that was. Trauma, PTSD, trauma,
Yeah.
Yes.
Great. Thank you. Yes. If you ever want to come back and do another episode and go like a deep dive on those, I'd be happy to do that.
I love talking about, we call them the PMADs because it's just easier to say, but each one is distinct and unique, and they can overlap too. I love talking about that. I also love talking about perimenopause and what's happening. I do a perimenopause and a perinatal kind of 101. I do webinars for the community that kind of goes over all that. And then I also do trainings for the mental health therapists. It's a little bit more clinical for each subject. And it's my favorite thing to do and talk about. So I'd love to come back and talk with you.
That would be awesome. Thank you so much. Is there anything you want to leave people with today as we end here?
No, if I could leave, there's so much information I feel like it's important. But if I could leave anyone with just any message, it would just be to trust yourself and start with rebuilding your relationship and connection to yourself.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening. If you learned something new today, consider writing it down in your phone notes or journal and make that new neural pathway light up. Better yet, I'd love to hear from you. Send me a DM on Instagram, email me, or leave a voice memo for us to play on the next show. The way you summarize your takeaways can be the perfect little soundbite that someone else might need. And lastly, leaving a review really helps others find this podcast, so please do if you found this episode helpful. And P.S., clicking subscribe ensures you'll be here for the next episode. See you then.